Welcome back to Truck and Talk, the official podcast of Mesilla Valley Transportation. This is where we sit down with the people shaping the future of the logistics industry, proving that MVT is much more than just a trucking company. I'm your host, Stephanie Valle. And today we're joined by Monica Mossman, the Vice President of Operations here at MVT. Monica's story is a masterclass in growth. She started at MVT at just 21 years old as a customer service representative, or CSR, and planner. Today, she leads operations at one of the most respected fleets in the country. In this episode, we're talking about the gritty reality of logistics today. We cover managing extreme unpredictability, meeting intense customer expectations, bridging the gap between operations and drivers, and why leading with empathy is just as important as maximizing efficiency. Monica, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, before we dive into our conversation, we start with a segment we like to call Fuel for Thought. It's where we step back and look at what's shaping the industry right now. Are you ready?
Yes.
So you've noted that the biggest challenge facing trucking today is the pure uncertainty of tomorrow's network balance, and that historical data doesn't dictate tomorrow's needs anymore. So from an executive operations standpoint, how do you steer a massive fleet through this kind of fog?
I believe a lot of it has to go back to numbers and staying in close communication with our customers to figure out what tomorrow looks like for them and putting those two together to figure out what to do next.
We hear constant headlines about shifting global trade, new tariffs, and sudden supply chain disruptions. So how do those big macroeconomic events trickle down to affect the moment-by-moment decisions that you have to make in order to keep customers happy?
I think we have to adjust as soon as we hear of something affecting our lane flow, our customers. And one, we have to figure out what solutions we can offer them if it is something that's going to change their normal lanes. And then two, we need to figure out what we need to adjust on our end to make sure the trucks stay moving and don't stop.
Yeah, it's always important to have to be ready to act, right?
Yes, for sure. And we have to stay ahead of it as much as we can, even though there's not a lot of predictability in this.
Well, speaking about predictability, AI and predictive analytics are dominating logistics headlines right now. But in a market where demand is incredibly hard to predict, how do you balance utilizing data with relying on human intuition and grit of your operations team?
I think that's a really good question because we are a very number-based company. So we have numbers that we can see at 10:30 and know what we need to adjust so that at the end of the day, our numbers are where they need to be. So we have always looked at numbers to predict what tomorrow is going to be, what the next day is going to be. And although it may change, we at least have a really good idea based off of what our KPIs are.
Yeah, okay. So that's our Fuel for Thought segment. So let's get to our interview, shall we?
Okay, perfect.
So let's wind the clock back. A lot of people in this industry did not initially plan on a career in trucking. So what was the pivot moment that made a 21-year-old Monica interview for a customer service representative role at MVT?
I needed a job. That was pretty much it. I had worked at a freight forwarder, and I had a little bit of experience there, and I liked the urgency. And I interviewed, I got hired. That's pretty much it.
Okay, so trucking does have a way of hooking people in. And once you were in the door, what made you realize that this fast-paced environment wasn't just a job, but actually your long-term career?
One part of it has to do with the company itself. I absolutely love who I work for, who I work with. And I think the culture that we have there has kept me here. Another part of it is every day is different. I never know what to expect. The solution today may not be the solution tomorrow, but overall, it's all the same. Our goals are the same. Our structures are the same. Our processes are the same, but we have to continue adjusting.
So, Monica, you've grown from an entry-level planner all the way to VP of operations. Looking back, what was the steepest learning curve that you faced during that climb?
I'm still learning to this day how to stay out of the day-to-day. I need to look at the big picture, make sure that I am staying ahead for my team, and letting them do their job because they know how to do it best.
You've shared a powerful story with us in your pre-interview. You mentioned a defining moment where you learned that someone with a tough exterior might be dealing with unseen personal struggles. So, how did that realization fundamentally change the empathetic way that you lead today?
I know that everyone has different challenges throughout their day. Some of it's work-related, some of it's family, and it's driver, it's staff, it's myself included. And it's very important that when I'm approaching whoever it is, that I keep that in mind. Because I don't want to be that one interaction that they have that changes the way the rest of their day is. I want to be impactful, but at the same time get my point across in a positive manner.
I like how earlier you were saying you look at numbers, you handle numbers, but when you're talking to people, you treat them like individuals. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, for sure.
So let's look under the hood at what it actually takes to run operations at a carrier like MBT. So you've joked that you plan out your calendar every morning, but it rarely survives that contact with the actual day. So how do you build an operational strategy around so much unpredictability?
So it goes back to our goals and our KPIs. We still have those that we have to meet at the end of the day. And even though my day may start off with a few meetings, it's rarely going to just have those few meetings. I'm going to have a couple derailments, and I'm going to have my attention go to issues that come up throughout the day. But at the end of the day, our goals are still the same. So I still have to make sure that everything is attended to. We're on the right path. And at the end of the day, I could say I did my job.
Great. A major part of operations is balancing customer expectations with network realities. So when a massive disruption hits, like a weather event or a sudden market shift, what is the actual process for how your team pivots to protect the customer's freight?
First is awareness. Make sure that we know what is going on that's going to affect our customers. And then second is over-communicate, internally and externally. Sometimes there's nothing we can do, and that's where it just comes down to communication and just being very honest on both sides, whether it's internal or external. There's nothing we can do. And if there is something we can do, then we communicate and then we follow through with it.
So you manage different departments that all have different daily areas of responsibility. So how do you prevent those silos from forming and ensure that everyone is rowing in the same direction to meet customer expectations?
That is a good question because that is hard. But at the end of the day, our goals are all the same. We all want drivers to be happy. We all want to make miles. We all want to have our customers happy. And when you put that together, that gets us the numbers that we need.
I think it also goes back to something you said earlier about over-communication. Would you say that's fair?
Oh, for sure. Over-communicating between departments so that everyone is on the same page. Everyone understands the goal. Everyone knows where we're at to that goal too.
Yeah. I know I use the phrase over-communication, but sometimes I feel like it's just basic communication, right? Because sometimes people think things, but they don't verbalize, right?
Yes, I completely agree because then they think, oh, I told him once. Well, no, you might have to tell them more than once. Maybe tell them the initial issue and then follow up with an update and then follow up with a resolution.
Yeah, it's always good advice. So what would you say that your favorite part of the job is? And would you just maybe walk us through how you coach your team to trust their own problem-solving instincts in high-stakes situations?
I think my favorite part is when we have our small successes throughout the day, because that tells me that I am doing my job. And that also tells me that my team is acknowledging that they've had their successes. And I think that's important because there's a lot of things thrown at us throughout the day. And it's very easy to get negative and it's very easy to get discouraged. And if we look back through our day, most of it is successes. It's just we get hung up on that one error, which I'm an overthinker. So I 100% get stuck on what I've said wrong or what I could have done differently. And it's very easy to do. So it's very, very important that we celebrate those small successes.
Customer expectations are higher than ever, and efficiency is everything. So, without giving away all the secret sauce, what is a recent operational improvement that really moved the needle for MBT's efficiency?
We are working very closely with our IT department to make internal improvements, and that has definitely changed some of the day-to-day for some of our team members. It's allowed them to see their tasks easier. It's allowed them to see what needs to be addressed quicker, and it's allowed them to be a little bit more efficient. I would say that it's definitely something that I could say without spilling too much.
Okay. So, let's talk about how you navigate some tensions that can arise internally, especially between sales and operations, because sales always wants to say yes to the customer, and operations has to deal with the actual physical reality of what trucks can legally and safely do. How do you navigate that tension?
I think it's going back to the information that's provided and then giving solutions to what we can do. Sometimes it's not necessarily the capacity that the sales rep wants. Sometimes it's not necessarily the trailer pool that they'd like. And it's just going back to them and explaining what we can do. Still make the customer happy, still get the business, but be a little bit more realistic on what we can deliver.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe there's an example that you can give us of a situation like that?
We had one recently where the volume was really low for the customer. It was 7 loads a month, and they were looking for a larger trailer pool than what you should need for 7 loads a month. So it's just us going back to them and explaining to them, if you have 7 loads a month, you probably don't need 5 trailers there. You probably need 1. We can make sure that we'll service all of the loads as they tender over, but we don't really need to be tying up that many trailers.
Yeah. Let's talk now about the lifeblood of MBT, our professional drivers. So how do the daily decisions made by your operations team directly impact a driver's profitability, safety, and quality of life on the road?
So pretty much everything we do inside of operations, from booking loads to scheduling, would affect a driver. It's very important that my team understands that drivers are paid per mile. So it's very important that the loads are available to them to pick up and deliver within their hours of service, and we're not sitting them in either side. And it's important that we keep them rolling.
There's often a perceived wall between the operations floor and the cab of the truck. So what is the number one thing that you desperately wish that drivers understood about the behind-the-scenes chaos when they call into your team?
That is a great question, because yes, I can definitely see there being a wall and certain perceptions. The one thing that I would like drivers to understand is that we are trying. We are doing everything we can to make it a better experience for them, to give them more automation inside of the cab of the truck, and to just make it to where information is readily available to them. It's a little slower process, but we are 100% trying.
Yeah. I can imagine they feel, going back to what we were talking about, silos, I'm sure they feel like they're alone because they are alone in the cab, but you're back there, you're trying to make things happen for them.
Yes, we are definitely trying to make it easier for them. We're trying to make it easier for our staff, and it's just using technology that takes a while.
Yeah.
But we have a really good team that's working on that.
So flipping that around, what is something that you constantly have to remind your operations staff to keep in mind about the gritty realities of being a driver alone on the road?
I think it's just that. Just reminding them that they're out there waiting for us, whether it's waiting for us to answer the phone, whether it's waiting for us to give them information, or waiting for a load. They could be just waiting at a shipper. So it's very important that we recognize the fact that there's a lot of outside factors for a driver that we don't necessarily know, that we don't necessarily see either.
You have a strict standard that your team will do everything possible to make sure that everyone is taken care of, that everyone is answered, that they have their questions answered and heard from before shifts end. So why is that rule so critical to MBT culture and to a driver's state of mind?
I think one is we touch base with them and they know that we're here. We do a start of shift check and we do an end of shift check. And that could be as simple as making sure the driver's rolling on time, and it could be reaching out to the driver. When there's weather events, we make a point to reach out to the drivers and make sure that we actually talk to them, make sure they're in a safe location, and then we leave that information for the next shift. So then the next shift does their AM and PM check. But it's very important that we have that communication and we make sure that, one, the driver is doing okay, and then two, the load is on time.
Yeah. So Royal Jones has built MVT on dual foundation. He's focused on fuel efficiency and winning paired with deep family values. How do you balance the hard metrics of operational efficiency with treating your team and the drivers like family?
The culture that we have is the culture that we have. We treat everyone fairly and equally. We don't, and he's said this before, and I think he said it in the 9 a.m. meeting this morning. We don't have time for C students. We don't have space for C students. So it's very important that all of our team members are efficient and executing to expectations at the same time of treating everyone fairly with respect. And then we hit our goals. We hit our metrics.
So when a driver is dealing with a tough day, maybe they have a delayed shipper or there was a broken plan or, they call in frustrated, how do you apply with empathy that you talked about earlier while still enforcing the standards needed to get the freight delivered?
I think that just comes down to the phone call and how we answer it. Normally, a fleet manager will get that call. They're going to get the upset driver, and they're going to have to understand that he's not really upset with you. He's upset with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we listen. We figure out if it's something that we could solve. And if it's not something that we could solve, we're honest and upfront and let him know what we can do. We escalate internally and make sure we get an answer back to the driver if it is a canceled load or if it is a delay at the shipper.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very important that we listen and we 100% always follow up.
Yeah, you can't take things like that personally, right?
Right. No, it's very important that you understand that that is one phone call. And you're going to have to hang up that call, answer the next one with that same cheerful voice as if you weren't just yelled at.
And I think it's important that what you said is, and I've had to say this to people too, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the situation because there's not a lot that you can do when you're irritated to calm the irritation and sound calm sometimes, right?
Right. And it's important that we in our office, in the operations office, recognize that because there is a lot of factors that drivers are going to deal with that we do not see. We do not have to deal with shippers and people at the truck stop and passenger cars while they're in a sleeper with a 53-foot trailer.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the best driver, but I'm not the worst either. And I don't want to drive next to me.
So speaking of driving, looking through the windshield, where do you see fleet operations fundamentally heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I would say there's a lot of additions in technology that's going to help us be even more efficient than what we are right now. On the driver's side, in the cab, and then in the information that's provided to the team, and hopefully some more automation on our side in the dispatch too.
Are there any trends that our internal teams and drivers should be preparing for right now to make sure that MVT is staying ahead of the competition?
I think the biggest thing goes back to technology and adding more of that inside of our day-to-day just to make us more efficient. That'll give us more visibility to some of the numbers that we don't necessarily have right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And then that'll allow us to predict what we need to do for tomorrow so that we could be ahead with our customers.
Are there specific traits and skills that you think the next generation of industry leaders will have to be ready for or have in their skill set?
I think, in my personal opinion, the future leaders have to be able to stay within the company expectations, stay within the company model, but also understand when is it time to get creative with keeping in mind the company expectations in regards to numbers.
I think it's important to point out that things are always evolving, right? There's always a lot of market uncertainty. And so therefore, what trucking looks like today is not what trucking is going to look like maybe in 5 or 10 years, right?
Correct. And we saw that with COVID too. when the pandemic hit, it completely changed the predictability of what we normally would see. Normally, January would be slow, then it would start picking up, and we stopped seeing that, which is kind of nice because this January was a pretty nice month for us. So I'm hoping it continues.
What is a major myth about operations that you would want to bust?
I would say one of the biggest things that you hear is they're just sitting around, they're not doing anything, which obviously is not true. A lot of it comes down to the communication. We have multiple ways to talk to drivers. We can talk to them through the tablet. We could talk to them through texting. We have talked to them through the phone call. Prefer phone call for sure. But with so many ways to communicate, there's also opportunities within those communication ways. So it's very important that everyone understands that we're there. We're staffed 24/7. We always have somebody available to answer. It's just with so many different ways to communicate, it's sometimes a miss.
So from what you have said, you can write a to-do list, you can plan out your day, and then the whole thing will end up in the trash. What makes you come back day after day after day?
I would say just that. Because that to-do list is eventually going to get done. But I like the unpredictability. I like how you can come in and not know what you're going to encounter. And it's very nice when you have a driver come in and tell you about his family, just to say hi and tell you. And then it's also nice to have somebody come to you with an issue and you work together to solve it. It's very satisfying at the end of the day. So I enjoy the chaos.
Well, before we end our interview, if you could go back and give a piece of advice to 21-year-old Monica on her first day as a customer service representative at MVT, what would that advice be?
I would say keep an open mind, always stay positive, and never let the failures throughout your day bring you down. Learn from them. Always learn from them. But never let them bring you down, and don't do the same mistake twice.
And when people think about MVT operations 5 years from now, what do you hope that they say about Monica Mossman's leadership?
I would hope they say that I'm a positive leader that taught them something that helped them to be a better leader themselves.
Well, Monica, thank you so much. I know that we took you out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
But we really appreciate you being here in studio with us to talk about operations and be able to dispel the myths and talk about what your job is, because I think it's really important for everybody to know all of the hard work that you're putting in here. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And it's clear that operations isn't just about trucks and freight. It's about people, perspective, and preparation. And if you're interested in joining a company that values growth, accountability, and teamwork, you can visit m-v-t.com to learn more. I'm Stephanie Valle, and until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and keep on trucking.